Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I will begin by acknowledging the remarks of the member for Couva South that it is a good thing that this government has brought this bill to this House. And Madam Speaker, the member for Couva South did me the service as well of alerting Madam Speaker and the House to the fact that I will be moving certain amendments during the committee stage, and I'm also thankful to him for alerting the House and Madam Speaker to that fact. And may I just indicate for the benefit of members so that the member does not claim to be ambushed, that with respect to the amendment which I propose to make to clause 25 of the present bill before you, in subclause 2, which is to be replaced, I will be deleting the words in the second line of subclause 2, with or without notice to the site manager. Madam Speaker, much has been said today by the members on the other side with respect to the bill which is before this House, and it would be to do a disservice really to the substance of this bill. It would be to do a disservice to the time that members have spent in this House on serious business for me to trivialize this bill, which is serious business, by rising to the bait of seeking to respond to almost 90% of what has been said by the other side. Because what is clear from what has been said, and it was apt and appropriate that the last speaker for the other side admitted that it is a good thing that this government has brought this bill. What is clear from what has been said by the other side is that this is opposition for the sake of opposition. May I thank the members of the government for the very learned and fulsome and detailed analysis which they have given to the population of the bill which is before this House, and they have made my task in winding up comparatively easy to the extent that I do not need to go through in any great detail much more of what has already been said by way of response to those few matters of substance which were raised on the other side. A couple of the matters which were raised, however, I think I should respond to, if only for the purpose, Madam Speaker, of correcting the record, so that Madam Speaker will recall that the member for Pointe-a-Pierre and the member for Miaru, and indeed the member for Oropouche East, all pointed to the fact that, and referred with some detail to the fact that they purport to be here today to speak on behalf of the stakeholders of the scrap industry in Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, you will recall when I opened in my pilot to this bill that I spoke to the fact that there has been, and remarkably, if I may say so, a significant degree of consultation that has been undertaken by this government, not least 3 occasions, which I have already pointed to in my pilot. And I just want to put on record, which I did not do in my pilot, but which I think is now appropriate so that the circumstance not be misrepresented. I want to put on record, Madam Speaker, the contributions which the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs has recorded that it received from the stakeholders with whom the consultation was engaged. And Madam Speaker will recall I spoke to 3 consultations, one in August, one in October, and one in November. And I'll read in some detail the record of the responses which were provided by the stakeholders. And I will read it on both sides of the coin, those which were in support and those which were against what was being proposed by the government. So the pertinent feedback which was received from the stakeholders included removing the licensing system from the Magistrates Court to the Ministry of Trade and Industry. That we have done by this bill. Licenses should continue to be annual. That we have done by this bill. There should be inspection of the loading of scrap metal for export at the scrap metal site. That we have done by this bill. The minister should have the power to vary or revoke a license. That we have done by this bill. There should be a duty to keep records. That we have done by this bill. There should be given a power of entry and inspection to certified officers. That we have done by this bill. There should be the establishment of a database for the industry. That we have done by this bill. There should be a process of identification of motor vehicles being used to collect scrap metal. That we have done by this bill. There should be an increase in penalties. That we have done by this bill. The practice of majority of scrap metal collectors and dealers to present identification at the point of collection or sale of scrap metal. That we have done by this bill. Strong support the stakeholders articulated for the law to require collectors and dealers to present identification and contact details when buying and selling scrap metal. That we have done by this bill. The clear majority of collectors and dealers requested and recorded customer contact information. That we have done by this bill. The weighing of scrap metal before sale. We have not done that by this bill, but we will do it in the regulations. Cash is the preferred method of payment amongst both collectors and dealers, and may I say the intention with the regulations is to allow a limit of a certain amount of cash and for electronic means of payment or checks to be otherwise used. To establish, I'm continuing with the recommendations which we received from the stakeholders with whom we held consultations. To establish a centralized system to allow collectors and dealers to liaise with one organization. And I dare say that the one organization, because at the forefront of the consultation was the learned gentleman, Mr. Alan Ferguson. I dare say the one organization in contemplation is the Scrap Dealers Association led by Mr. Ferguson. To establish standardized processes to obtain a license and for other scrap metal offenses and matters. That we have done by this bill. They express support for a collector to be able to offload at a licensed scrap metal site. That we have done by this bill. That provision should be made for an export license. We have done that, Madam Speaker, by this bill. Concern was expressed whether a scrap metal dealer can also collect scrap, and there is provision in that for the scrap metal dealer to function as a collector of scrap at the scrap metal sites for which he is licensed. So that we have done by this bill. Dealers should be able to alter scrap metal after 8, not 15 days. Madam Speaker, you will recall, we proposed 15 days. They didn't say no, You can't keep it for 15 days. They said, do it 8 days instead. So there was give and take. They were making proposals as we made our proposals, and in the nature of consultation, we were not bound to accept what was proposed to us. We stayed with the 15 days. And you will recall that I had said, Madam Speaker, in my opening, that they had recommended the use of 24-hour CCT camera systems instead of the scrap metal inspector. Well, we opted for the scrap metal inspector instead of 24-hour CCTV coverage. Those aspects of their recommendations, which we did not accept, were they complained that the majority of scrap metal collectors source their products from roadsides, 99.6%, households, 97%, and landfills, 68.9%, and that the scrap metal dealers collected and sold mostly non-functioning household appliances, and the statistics were given to us. We took all of that into consideration. It is not that we ignored it. They gave us the information, we assessed it, we gave it all to the Law Reform Commission, and we asked them to take it into consideration in weighing the policy which was to be brought to the Cabinet. So, Madam Speaker, it is less than candid on the part of the members on the other side to purport to stand here today to claim to be speaking on behalf of the Scrap Dealers Association when we in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs have a very clear written record of what was the process of consultation and what were the engagements on both sides. In point of fact, I only on the 12th of December, I noted, and I cite what I'm about to cite because there was one matter I will wish to correct. I noted a press release, which I will refer to, dated the 12th of December 2022, a media release, TTSIDA concerned over Scrap Metal Act. It was published in the daily newspapers. And the very first paragraph says, it is under the signature of Alan Ferguson, President. The very first paragraph says, the Trinidad and Tobago Scrap Iron Dealers is pleased that the Scrap Metal Act 2022 is going before the Parliament on Wednesday, which paves the way for us to move from an unregulated, informal sector to a regulated sector standing side by side with other businesses. That's the opening paragraph of the media release. The last paragraph of the media release says, as a result, we are urging the government to let good sense prevail for the people of this industry and by extension, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. They do go on to say in the middle of the media release that they are concerned that they need to get permission from the Commissioner of Police to be able to load scrap metal and to be able to conduct their business. Well, all of us are obliged by law to get the permission of the Commissioner of Police and the members of the police service to go about our lawful business. So I don't see that as a complaint of any substance. They went on to say in their media release that after carefully examining the bill over the weekend, we have found that some of these terms will not be in the best interest of those in our industry who are fully dependent on scrap metal for survival. So I find it odd. And I happen to know Mr. Ferguson. I have met with him on 3 occasions in the course of these consultations, and he was here today. I find it odd that the members on the other side could purport to represent a state of fact which is simply not correct as being representative of the truth of the process of consultation which we engaged in with the other side. Madam Speaker, the one correction that I wish to put on record in relation to the press release, which I have just referred to, of the Trinidad and Tobago Scrap Dealers Association, Scrap Iron Dealers Association, dated the 12th of December 2022, is in the last paragraph on page 1. The media release consists of 2 pages. They say, it should be noted that the association was provided with only a cabinet note consisting of 5 pages addressing some of the terms stipulated in the new act. Well, that is not correct, and indeed I'm grateful to the member for Orpush East who referred to the papers that he had been given by the Scrap Dealer Association. What we did, Madam President, Madam Speaker, I beg your pardon, was we emailed, and I said this in my opening, we emailed to the Scrap Dealers Association and all of the other stakeholders, because there were many other than just Mr. Ferguson's association, a summary of what had been agreed by the cabinet when cabinet met to approve the policy of the Law Reform Commission. It would not have been correct, appropriate, or indeed, well, let me leave it at that. It would not have been correct or appropriate for me to have given to the members of the Scrap Dealers Association a copy of the cabinet note which recorded the deliberations of cabinet. And we did not do that. But we held a full consultation with them. We went as far as to say to the Scrap Dealers Association, when we met with them on the 25th of November, we said, cabinet met the Thursday before, the 25th of November was a Friday, and I recall very clearly saying to the assembled members of the association, cabinet met last week Thursday and deliberately referred this matter to the FNGP, the Finance and General Purposes Committee, which is meeting next Monday, knowing that we, the members of the small committee who were engaging in consultation, knowing that we were meeting with you, the stakeholders, on Friday to enable us to receive from you, the stakeholders, your views, so that those views could be communicated to the Finance and General Purposes Committee on the following Monday to then be put as a final position to the cabinet, which met the Thursday after the 25th of November when that policy was finally approved. So I entirely, completely, and without fear of contradiction, reject the suggestion that has been repeated ad nauseum on the other side, that there has been insufficient consultation, that there has been misrepresentation by any member of this government as to the seriousness with which it undertook this task. And all of the members on the government side have made this point, and I repeat it almost as a swan song. We are concerned about 3 things with this bill. One is to ensure that the industry is revived for the interests of the small people of this country who rely on it. We are concerned, secondly, that the resumption of that industry in order to provide a livelihood to those persons who rely on it should not be abused by the criminal element, and therefore we have taken the task of regulating that industry by the bill which is before Parliament today. And thirdly, we have undertaken the task of regulating it in the terms that we have in order to protect the national security infrastructure of this country, which has been pillaged over the past several months by that small criminal element. And let me emphasize, this small criminal element which has abused the legitimate business people, small and medium business people of this country. And we took the decision, Madam Speaker, and here I wish to address, among others, the last speaker, who accused me of being hasty, ill-prepared, and other fine adjectival words. We took the decision to come to this Parliament knowing that this was and is a work in progress. But we had given the commitment when I had with the Honourable Minister of National Security, we called a press conference either on the 12th of August or the day immediately after legal notice 164 was issued. And we announced to the citizenry of this country that the ban was valid to the 23rd of February 2023, but that I would report to the Parliament and to the people of this country by the halfway mark, and I would do my utmost best to bring legislation to the Parliament. So that what I have done with the very able assistance of the professional staff of the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs and the Ministry of Trade and Industry is not hasty. It is in the interest of the people of this country to engage with them and to say to them as we bring this bill to the people, now that we have brought this bill and we are continuing to work with you to make it that much more appropriate for your regulation and your safeguarding, to continue to work with us as we perfect it and as we build out the regulations. And it is, I believe, the Honourable Minister of Energy and Energy Industries in his contribution today who emphasized the point that there will be partial proclamation of this bill if it is passed in the Parliament today. And the reason why there will be partial proclamation is because we recognize that this being a work in progress, we recognize that there having to be regulations to regulate the industry, not all of that capable of being accomplished by the end of this year, which is a mere 17 days away or 16 days away. We have given the commitment to the population, and we intend to implement the commitment to proclaim enough of this act and to deem it operational so that by Christmas, small and medium players in this society can once more be operating their business, as Mr. Ferguson asked me in the consultation that I had with him in the presence of the Minister of Trade and Industry and in the presence of the Minister of National Security. Mr. Ferguson said to me after thanking us for coming to them with a bill, he said, can you at least get this bill operational into law so that people can have something to eat for Christmas? And I said, we will do our very utmost to do that. And that is why we are asking this House not only to pass this bill today, but we will be advising Her Excellency the President, pursuant to the Statutes Act and the proclamation section of this legislation, when it becomes law, to enact specific sections of the Act to deem it in operation in relation to present licensed dealers, collectors, and dealers who have licenses under the current Old Metal Marine Act so that they can continue into operation until the 14th of April 2023 so that they can continue to earn a living. And let me just emphasize that as the date. My good friend and parliamentary colleague, the Minister of Trade and Industry, I think mentioned August inadvertently. The date is the 14th of April 2023. That is the date to which we are going to ask this Parliament to allow this legislation to come into effect and to be deemed to be operational in the interest of ensuring that the people of this country can earn a living under this act and not to be abused by that small criminal element, including some of those who are currently facing the force of law when all that is to be revealed will be revealed. So that, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Create